Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Katie Horne, and I'm a current candidate for a Master's of Arts in Teaching. And my research topic this year was reflection as a lifestyle. So, a little bit of background of why I chose this topic was when I was in school myself and as going through different practicums in student teaching, I really noticed that children were only asked to reflect when they had done something wrong or had received a poor grade. So, this was something that I really wanted to change the thinking of. As for myself, I really didn't understand how to reflect or why reflection was important until I was in college. So this was something that I really wanted to dig deeper into. My research question was, can elementary students with explicit instruction and support use various models of reflection to clarify their goals, better formulate routes to achieve those goals, and increase their self-esteem, ultimately leading to increased achievement in the classroom? Some key concepts that are really important for my research that came up amongst all of the literature was, of course, reflection as one of them, which was defined by Bringle and Hatcher in 1997 as the intentional consideration of an experience in light of particular learning objectives. Another really important key concept was self-esteem from Webster 2019. This was defined as confidence and satisfaction in oneself. Self-confidence, on the other hand, which are often used interchangeably, was very different. Also received from Webster 2019, self-confidence is confidence in oneself, but also in that person's ability and power. So it's a big understanding to know the difference between the two. The last concept was achievement, as defined by Clyde, DiPerna, and Elliott of 2002. Achievement is specifically defined as achievement competence as a multidimensional construct consisting of skills, attitudes, and behaviors of students that contribute to their success in the classroom. The models of reflection that I used for my students were written reflection. Written reflection was the most common based on Ryan 2014. Ryan talked a lot about that writing was an easy form for really anyone to use when looking at reflection. So this was the first one that I taught over the course of my research because I knew students would be familiar with writing and comfortable in that. It was important, though, that I stress to my students that when using writing, your punctuation, grammar, and spelling were not at all taken into consideration. Another reflection model that I used was visual reflection. This is also considered drawing. This was something that I noticed my students really like to do in their free time anyway, and so I was excited to be able to incorporate this using Malky Doty of 1994, who really stressed the importance of giving the option for an artistic outlet for students when reflection came into play. The last one was spoken reflection, and based on HIB in 2016, it was really discussed the importance of giving students the opportunity to talk to the teacher when they felt the need to, because there are times where students are at home and may not get the attention that they need. So this was something that I also really wanted to include for my students. My thesis statement was that explicit instruction about reflection and practice using different reflective techniques can help students clarify their personal goals, better formulate routes to achieving those goals, and increase their self-esteem, ultimately leading to increased achievement in the classroom. For my participants, I had 30 students, 16 female, 14 male, in a Central Virginia rural elementary school. It was considered that 36.9% were economically disadvantaged, and this was a true representation of the school as a whole. The method instrument that I used to look at their self-esteem and to give them a score of self-esteem were these questions that I found were very, very helpful for students, and they were able to connect to those questions really well. At the beginning of the pre-survey, we went over each question individually, and I gave students the opportunity to ask me any clarifying questions that might help them. All questions seemed very straightforward, and most of the students were very engaged in wanting to really take the questions into heart of themselves and take their time. My method timeline, on day one, this was over a 10-day span. On day one, they did their pre-self-esteem survey, We also then talked about what reflection was to them and made up a personal definition for all students to know as we kept on going. And this was a definition that I prompted them to create for themselves and one that we used during the remainder of the research. They also took their multiplication pretest. The multiplication served as a control. Day 2, I introduced written reflection. This was, again, written was most common to them and was where they were comfortable, so that was why I used that one first. The next day, we talked about visual reflection. This was also something that they were very familiar with and were really excited to participate in. On the 4th day, I introduced spoken reflection. Students were a little apprehensive with spoken. They were not jumping to participate in this model, but I did see that around day 8, students were more willing to participate in spoken reflection. On day 5, this became their guided practice. So this was me giving them the options and the different models and really talking to them about now reflection is completely personal. You have all the tools you need, and so now it's time for you to explore the different models and make those personal for yourself. This was also the day that they took their multiplication post-test. On day 6, they took their division test, pre-test, and they were given prompted choice. Again, this was me giving them the different models and allowing them to really take accountability and choose what they wanted to do. Days 7 through 9, you can see, were just prompted choice. I gave them the models and set them on their way to explore personal reflection. Day 10, they did their post self-esteem survey. They also were given prompted choice again, and this was also the day they took their division post-test. These were the reflection questions. There were only three reflection questions that were given to them at the beginning of each reflection period of time. So as you can see, the first one really talks about, was the experience or situation that you're referring to positive or negative? The second one asks, why was it positive or why was it negative? And the third question was, what did you learn about yourself or the situation now that it's over? For the intervention, this was a piece of student work based completely off of written reflection. This student talks about an actual combo of some negative and positive feelings about a situation at home. Another piece of student work for the visual. This student really enjoyed visual reflection, and I saw that this particular student used this model a lot of times when reflecting and really liked having the opportunity to kind of use both. As you can see, they do have some drawings, but they also did incorporate some writing. And so that was really interesting to see the two mesh together. The spoken reflection, unfortunately, none of the students were interested in being recorded. I did ask each student if they were willing to be recorded, but most of them were very uncomfortable with that, and so I did not push it and just kind of left that alone. For my results, I do have a mixed methods here. As you can see, the first bar graph is the pre-intervention and post-intervention for Class A and their academic means. You can see that test scores did go up during the division period. However, the division post-test does show a slight decline in their academic achievement. Class A's self-esteem, though, however, did rise significantly during the post-intervention period. And there were many students that showed very, very large growth individually. Another set of results, these were for Class B, so you can see that their academic achievement did go up slightly during the division pretest, however, did drop quite a bit in the division post-test. And unfortunately, their self-esteem dropped significantly during the post-intervention. However, it was noted when going back that Class B struggled more with division, and their post-test scores were, because you can see they were a little bit lower, they were feeling a little bit down on themselves because of that. Many students were really struggling with this concept. Some findings that I had, there were 5 big themes that I really found when looking through their actual reflections. The 5 themes I found were academic, so this was talking specifically about school academics, very basic. The next one was school social, so this was any kind of friend or teacher situations that might have occurred. Home social was anything going on at home with family members. Personal was specifically about themselves and how they were feeling. And a combo where certain students would bring in a mix of all of the different themes. What's important about this study, even though there was not a lot of statistically significant results, it is important that I did see a boost in student self-esteem. There were many times that students loved talking to me about their reflection and were really eager to share their reflections with other teachers and other students, and even encourage each other that when someone was having a bad day or had a big success on a test, they're like, well, why don't you reflect about it? So that was something that I really loved seeing. It's important to stress that reflection is not just for negative situations. It's not just about taking a negative situation and turning it around or having to learn from it necessarily. It can also be based on positive and how you can keep those positives going. I also saw that many students were less stressed. The reflection period was done a lot of times, and this was purely coincidental. It was done before test taking, and that seemed to really help them kind of jot all their feelings out and feel a little bit better going into their test. Some implications for teachers is that defining reflection is critical. We only defined reflection the one day, and we made up our own class definition for reflection that I left up on the board for them, and that was critical because they always knew where to look to find it. It's also important to explicitly teach reflection. We modeled together many, many times of how to do it and why it was important, and that seemed to really help them. Also, for number 3, encouraging individualism. I stressed a lot of times that reflection is completely personal. You do not have to share it with anyone unless you want to. So it was important to encourage and stress that this was personal. Some limitations I had were absences, of course. I had a couple of students that were not able to be included. Time, we did not have a huge time frame to do reflection. I would have loved to have had almost double the time. And then inconsistent time. Class A was my homeroom, and so we ended up having more time than I did with Class B. And so that oftentimes made Class B, I think, feel a little bit rushed. Some directions I would love to take this in were if the study is to be replicated, I would love to allow students to create a combo that works best for them. I would, of course, love to have a longer period of time. I would love to introduce this concept to students with learning disabilities. I had one student in particular who had ADHD, and this was something that he really enjoyed doing and seemed to really help him when he would get stressed. The last one is that reflection specifically for behavior. A lot of the research talks about reflection being used for students who are having a hard time behaving in the classroom or have disruptive behaviors. And so that's something that I would also love to look into. And so that is all for reflection as a lifestyle, and I would love to take any questions that you may have.
Katie, what do you think your students are able to do now that they're learning at home? That you've taught them the skills. How do you think that might impact what they're doing now?
That's a really great question, and I have actually thought about that, knowing that students are at home. A lot of times I had one student in particular ask me if reflection could only be done at school, and so I really stressed for a while that reflection is something that can happen anywhere, anywhere. And so I would encourage students to keep a journal at home and reflect on things at home if they wanted to. And it was funny. They thought, well, do I have to bring that in to show you that I did it? And I said, no, no, no. I said, remember, reflection is completely personal. So this is something that you do at home and you leave it at home. You do not have to bring it in. So I would hope that since we did talk about that and the irony that they're now at home, I would hope that they would maybe be using that to document, what they're doing during the day, what's hard about being at home all the time now, and maybe even what they want to learn when they get back to school, or even what they want to do and what they want to say when they get back to school.
I have a question, Katie. On the division pretest, were the pretest and the post-test the same?
They were not, they were slightly different, like slightly different. They were almost the same. I had many students score the same score, especially in Class A. Students in my homeroom, because we had more time for math together, I often felt that Class A always had a better handle on the concepts that we were talking about. We also had more time for small group time during our day. So with my homeroom group, we ended up having, I believe it was an hour 15 minutes for math, maybe even an hour 25. Whereas with Class B, I only had an hour, and that was if we came in on time for recess. So I often felt that Class A definitely benefited more in having an option to really talk to the teacher one-on-one about any kind of miscommunications or misunderstandings of concepts. So it was slightly different.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Katie, I know your research was in your student teaching placement, but do you
Yes.
know if the students used reflection after you were done with this research? Did you have any contact with the teacher?
So I actually did ask the teacher if she had noticed if any students were still doing, and she said that there still were a few that were reflecting, which I loved. She did say that a lot of times it wasn't as much academic, which I knew that was very realistic to my results. But she did say that she had seen a difference in students' self-esteem when going into a new math concept, and that oftentimes she had a couple of students who would reflect at the beginning of the unit and then reflect again at the end. So not as much in between reflection, but really looking at that first pre-test and that post-test and then reflecting on how they felt about that.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Katie. We are at the end of your time. Snacks for Katie.
Thank you, guys.
And let's sign off, and we'll see each other on the next link.